So we're putting ourselves out there, putting some necks on the line. We're making a few sort of observations and sort of some thoughts. I'm kind of glad I'm not on the panel actually, because there's a date, 29th of June 2007. I don't know how familiar that date is to you, but that's the date in which iPhone was actually launched. And I've worked in technology for a long time, and I was sort of immersed in working for the various handset manufacturers at that point, including Nokia. And people were saying to me, "What do you think? Is it going to be a success or not?" And I was saying, "Guys, really? Can you see it? I mean, look at Nokia's domination of the market and where they're at, and look at BlackBerry and so on. Yeah, don't buy any shares. I really strongly advise against it." Anyway, 10 years later on, what do I know? So anyway, we're in it's a difficult old game which we're in, and I think we are seeing a lot of excitement about AI, about machine learning. What is it going to do? To what extent is it really going to impact what we're doing and what we're about, and and the nature of our organisations and how our industry is organised? Because it's very easy to say it won't have an impact. It's very easy to say we're different. But we're seeing technology fundamentally revolutionising just about every profession, from accountants and lawyers to management consultants. Is there something different about us? Good question, big question. So, tell you what we'll do. We'll just do a bit of a show of hands, because I think one of the reasons that we're interested in this is it's our jobs now, isn't it? So in a sense, this is the reason why we are so interested in this. I remember growing up in rural Devon, seeing the kind of footage of how technology is revolutionising industry. That's blue-collar industries. I thought, well, white-collar industry is going to be fine. But surely, AI and machine learning, suddenly we can start being a little bit twitchy. So we're going to do the old school kind of rather than electronic voting. So let's do a bit of a show of hands for who thinks that their job is potentially under threat by artificial intelligence or machine learning. And we'll do a show of hands now, we'll do a show of hands at the end and see what kind of effect that has. So those who say yes, please raise. Okay. Ooh, what is it? Ooh, more than I thought. Right. I don't know. Let's say 15%, I think, will be my quantification of that. So let's see how we go. So we've got a great panel. Let's see if they do better than my prediction. Julia Ayling is head of research at MINDSHARE, media agency. Clearly, media has been profoundly disrupted by technology, I think it's fair to say. So I think she's going to have a lot to say about this topic. I dug around. I tried to find an interesting fact about each person which is relevant. Julia, you are a graduate in English literature. So I was I kind of interested, because I think in a sense our industry is about people and it's about that sort of slightly deeper understanding. As we're just hearing about the superdrive. Interested kind of, it will be our listening out for you as we go through about the extent to which you feel that how that interaction works. Okay. Chris Watkins, reader in AI at the University of London, interested in reinforcement learning, early studies on animal learning, and worked as a hedge fund manager in the 90s or advising hedge funds?
Hedge fund quant.
Sorry?
Devising trading strategies.
Okay, fine. So interesting to see, if we're going to see fundamental changes from his perspective. Matthew, entrepreneur, cognitive computing expert at Market Logic. Sorry,
that's right.
For a moment. Also, fascinating fact: represent Ireland in endurance races. Not quite sure what the relevance is, but I thought that was interesting to share. So, good man. And lastly, Sam Whitehead, Insights Manager at Blippar, specialising in augmented reality. Sam is actually also a chartered accountant. So let's see what kind of, what sort of impact, influence that has on your perceptions. So I'm just going to go down the line. What are the two big things which you're seeing might impact our industry? Julia, do you want to start that off?
Okay, we're starting this off. Well, certainly after those introductions, I'm feeling seriously outweighted there in terms of all the data and the technology guys.
So I'm slightly embarrassed about the English literature side of things coming up. Right. Okay, so the two things are my predictions for where AI is going to be going over the next few years as far as market research is concerned. For me, certainly working in the media industry, we're seeing technology disrupting how people are making decisions. And as a researcher, I think traditional research techniques are struggling to deal with that. Things like sort of your typical claimed responses just aren't working quite as well in terms of uncovering some of the nuance around decision making. So my first area is thinking about how AI is really going to help us get into some unstructured data sets. So we're spending a lot of time, for example, looking at things like social insights, looking at search behaviours, looking at things like the content that people are consuming, and thinking about how AI can really help us to unpick some of the stories and some of the insights in those sorts of spaces. And how it can fill the gap in terms of more traditional research techniques that just aren't coping quite so well now. So that's my first one. My second one, which possibly does feed into the English literature side of things, I'm going to chuck out the Personality Insights tool, which is, if you've not seen it, it's on the IBM Watson website. And it's really good just to have a little bit of a play around with. And I'm going to chuck this out just as a sort of quick, short-term thing that's going to grow quite fast. The reason for that, I think it taps into what we do as researchers. So I don't know about you, but the reason I got into this job is because I want to understand people. I want to kind of get to grips with what we're like as human beings. And something like that Personality Insights tool is absolutely great at taking a body of text and saying, this is what the personality is like of the person who said those words or who wrote that words. And you can start to look at things like the big five and all the different values. So for me, it feels really accessible. And the second thing about it that I really like is the fact that a lot of the media owners have started to use it and are using it as a technique to almost make their data sets accessible to us. So as soon as you start to see that, you start to see a load of continuity, and I think it almost has the potential to become something of a currency, certainly as far as the media agent industry is concerned.
Great, I think that's really interesting, and I fully endorse that. I think psychological profiling from data assets as well is going to be absolutely critical for particularly the media industry. So how does this square from the sort of from an academic perspective? You're sort of coming in, you're not sort of necessarily sort of immersed totally in our industry, I guess. How's from your perspective, when we were talking about this previously, you were saying, hey, hang on, you're not really looking at this sort of sufficiently boldly. There's some really fundamental changes which are going to happen here. So what's your perspective?
First of all, I'd like to say it's a great pleasure. This is the first market research conference of any kind I have been even near. It's great so far. You're such lovely people. You all want to understand people. Now, as a computer scientist, I'd say why bother? All you want to know is what they're going to buy and how much you can get them to pay. You can do that by direct experiments. If you set up particularly online marketing, you can do lots of experiments all the time, and experimental studies are just so much easier to interpret and better and directly relevant to what you want to do than observational studies. And you can use marvelous tools to profile large amounts of text and get to people's psychological states. But this is a very long train of reasoning to figure out what people are actually going to buy. So, on the basis of no expertise whatsoever, I'd say that end-to-end experimenting could be a big new trend, which might put a lot of people out of work. Oh, sorry. The second one, I think, is the coming hurricane is going to be personalized differential discriminative pricing. And this is going to be awful for society, and can I tell you why? The first reason is because economists think it's a good idea because no one's going to stop it. The much bigger effect will be that AI will be able to do discriminative pricing on the basis of personal and private information. This will make all kinds of private information far more valuable. And will your phone protect you? No, it'll be the traitor in your pocket. It'll tell everybody when you're drunk and they'll raise the prices on everything.
Okay, fine. A nice soundbite. Thank you. Is your phone the traitor in your pocket? But I think we're seeing, in a sense, I think Julia was talking about personality profiling from data and other assets, and Chris has kind of extended that theme. So, over to you, Matthew. What are your sort of thoughts?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew. So, Market Logic Software is a software provider that provides AI platforms to insights and marketing departments. Some really big companies at Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Tesco, etc. And what we see and what we're predicting is that what we're providing these companies is a route to information extremely quickly. The problem we find in a lot of big organizations, and any organization actually, is how do we get to information quickly when we've got so much information to try and find with IoT information, social, qualitative, quantitative. How do we get to the answers quickly? What AI will do and is doing is acting as an assistant essentially to a marketeer or an insight professional and delivering that information within milliseconds, where previously that may have taken hours or even days to find the answers to those theories or to help ask a question. So that's how we see the industry growing and how we see trends emerging, and it's only going to get more advanced. And what that leads as the second point is that it allows marketers and insight professionals to actually have fun with their job. Instead of looking and trying to find the needle in the haystack, that's already done for them, and it allows the marketer or the insight professional to do their job and find insights and deliver killer insights, not look through information.
Right. So in a sense, I think there's a traditionally we think about automation around the whole area of data collection, and that we need to have researchers' skills in order to pull that together and curate it and create meaning. We're starting to see a challenge to that, and how far can computers go in delivering that, and at what point do they stop, and at what point do we need humans to be part of that curation process? And I think it's a really interesting, important question. Sam.
Hi, everyone. The area of AI that excites me most is a branch called computer vision. So that is understanding images. And often people don't think of images as data. People think of quant and qual. They think of survey answers and stats and numbers. But images is a huge, untapped data set. And computer vision is pretty tough. Chris will be able to tell you much more than me. It's a hard thing to do, and people have been trying to crack it for 50 years. And really, in the last couple of years, there's huge growth, huge breakthrough. There's a couple of implications. Right now, the social listening platforms are kind of waking up to this. And just as a simple thing, where is the Coca-Cola logo? On Instagram, it's going to be there a million times a day when it hasn't been tagged. And now Coca-Cola, through AI, are able to find those images, find out who's drinking Coke, if they're at home, if they're on the beach, what's the context of those brand interactions. The second part, obviously I'm from Blippar. Blippar is an augmented reality platform, and you have to understand the visual world before you can augment it, which uses this computer vision tech. For 3 or 4 years now, we've had this technology where you can hold your phone up and it will tell you what you can see, and it will augment what you see with digital content. And just in the last few weeks, Google, Facebook, and Samsung, and Pinterest, everybody's waking up to this and everybody's doing it. And in a few years, this will be a behavior that we all do. We'll have these camera questions where Google doesn't suffice. I love Matthew's shoes. Where are they from? What's that car? What's that flower? And obviously, they're going to be great moments for brands to advertise in, for brands to communicate in. And I just think, that's really exciting, and that's the way that things are going.
So it's changing the nature of the relationship between consumers and brands, but also our ability to explore and examine those images is changing the basis on which we understand consumer behavior, right? So
yeah, absolutely. It's very similar to Google. It's almost doubling what Google can do. Google does it for text, and now there's going to be all of these platforms that can do it for the real world around you.
Okay. All right, so thank you guys. I think we've got some really interesting perspectives, predictions, heard it all here first. We can bring them back in 5 years' time to see, but for the moment, let's get some more out of them to put their necks on the line and get their perspective. I've got plenty of questions here. but I want to just conscious that let's throw it open and get questions from the floor, and then I'll come back in and ask additional questions. So anybody want to just throw something in there? You can comment or you can ask a question. We've got one down here, thank you.
How do you foresee privacy and regulations around that affecting artificial intelligence, especially when it comes down to pictures? And how that might have an impact on, will we actually be able to leverage the tool for analytics?
Julia, I mean, you work at this from a media perspective, and this is so technology, data is very, very much part of the whole media landscape. How do you think about this? How does in an AI machine learning world, is there such a thing as privacy anymore?
There is, and I think increasingly it's going to become even more important just with all the new regulations that are coming through. I mean, it's certainly something that we're looking at as an agency. We're trying to think about what we can do about it and how it starts to impact on things like programmatic, for example. I think we're going to have to start being more careful and be a little bit more grown up about it, and move it away from thinking about individuals much more and trying to sort of aggregate data up and anonymize it much more.
Okay, good.
I think we do a lot of work with, similar to Sam, analysing video, so looking at video and trying to understand sentiments from people's facial expressions and delivering that as an analysis. What we find is that people put things on YouTube and you can mine information, and that's public property, Snapchat, whatever it may be. So there is an ethical, maybe, discussion there, but in terms of legally, it's a millennial generation that are quite at home sharing videos, information as a public property nowadays. And brands want to get on top of that and see how people are interacting with the Coke can, whatever it may be. So there's an ethical question and there's a legal question. We feel legally that if it's out there, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question in the middle, Edward Appleton.
Yeah, hi, Sam. A question on computer vision. Is there a role of the human in trying to make sense of anything, any more context, emotion, behavior? Or is it going to be some really sexy machine which is really say we can all go to a beach in Spain and do something completely different?
I'm really sorry, I missed the first half of that.
How far does computer vision go in terms of its machine capability to actually interpreting the visuals that it's looking at, and where do you need somebody to make sense of all the stuff that it's looking at?
Sure. So, Blippar, at the moment, we describe ourselves as about a 5 or a 6-year-old. So if I was to hold up the app now, it would tell me there's people in the room, there's chairs, there's tables, there's drinks. The next level, and the level that it gets really useful for brands and insights teams, is when you can do really specific recognition. So, what is this car? Where is this dress from? And that's the stage where obviously it's going to be hugely useful, but you need a lot of data. And you need tagged data. So you need hundreds of thousands of images of cars saying that this is a Ford Focus 2012. And actually, computer vision has got quite far with the big databases of tagged images that already exist. And now we're at the stage where companies are seeking data. And that's why Google Photos gives you unlimited cloud storage, because that's how it gets it. That's why Facebook is doing so much with facial recognition and facial computer vision. So it's a question of data, really, and getting your hands on that data.
Just staying on that theme, can I just sort of build on it slightly, is that to what extent do we actually need humans to understand humans? Because we're excited about artificial intelligence and machine learning, and we can start to understand things about ourselves, like personality and so on, and the way in which we sort of use images, etc. But to what extent is it really getting to an understanding of humans and humanity and the kind of the way in which the consumer operates? And I know, Chris, you had some sort of fairly, you were coming at it from a sort of fairly punchy perspective, I think, earlier on. What's your views? Do we need humans to understand humans? And is there a limit to artificial intelligence and machine learning? So let's hear it from one end of the perspective.
Okay, philosophically, that's a great discussion, and the progress over the next 20, 30 years. Hey, let's not talk about that right now. But I think one of the trends there has been in AI and machine learning has been to do away with the insight. What you want to do is figure out what you want your trained system to achieve, how you can evaluate that, and then train a whole decision-making system from the data that goes in right at the beginning to what comes out at the end, and train that and leave out the insight. So famously, in computer translation systems, there's a quote from a researcher, even way back in the 90s, every time I sack a linguist, the performance gets better. They really didn't need to understand language in the way that humans did. They let the machines learn. And this trend has only been accentuated with Google Translate, which is based on rather stupid, simple algorithms being applied to unimaginable amounts of data.
Matthew, from your perspective, I mean, your software is really about, as we were talking about earlier on, about curation and creating those insights. And that's something which surely we should be doing. We could be doing, and we should be doing. And how far can you go?
Yeah. So I think from a company perspective and from a brand perspective, it's slightly different from, I believe, what Chris is saying. What we do is the human is there to make that final decision, to make the thesis and the hypothesis around the question. So what we do, the problem we're solving, and the issue that will continue to grow is the amount of data. We still believe there'll be a human intervention, and there needs to be today, and there will be in 10 years' time, to deliver the brand plan or to make the segmentation study. What the issue is how do we get to that information quickly when we've got so much information? The current status quo is, to some degree, we just forget about the information and go on gut feel, because it's just too much work to find this information from social or from whatever it may be. The change is to get the information quickly by using an intelligent algorithm to understand what you're trying to do and assist you. So it's not all doom and gloom, we don't believe anyway. we think there is a future, and I think it's an augmented future with AI helping the human. At the end of the day, we're all emotional human beings, and we need emotion in everything we do. That's not to say that algorithms won't be able to predict emotions, but there will be a human intervention to make something really hit home, a campaign or a product, whatever it may be.
And just to add to that,
briefly, if you may.
Very briefly, AI is amazing at spotting patterns, and it's already matched humans in certain fields, but it does lack common sense. And if you try and understand like a football fan's Twitter feed, there's so many passive aggressives and kind of false negatives, and we understand that subconsciously because we're humans and we have all that context and background. But AI is going to take a bit of time to catch up.
And I think that's an interesting point. Context, background, common sense. Check out a website called Spurious Correlations. It's by Tyler Viglin, who looks at the kind of relationships between Nick Cage films and people drowning in swimming pools and so on. There are obviously no relationships, but they correlate massively. Julia, did you want to? I want to come back. I want a question down here, but do you want to just sort of finish off that one very briefly, if I may ask you?
I think it's also the why. So a lot of the whole AI side of things is giving us the what or the how many, and it doesn't necessarily give us a why. And I think that's why a lot of us are here, and a lot of the reasons why we do the jobs that we do, and that still has a very important role to play in terms of understanding what's happening.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a question down here.
Hi, Richard Addy. Could we take a live case study and get your thoughts on what could AI do in giving us an understanding about the next general election?
Whoa, okay.
I'm so glad you asked that question. I don't know. I mean, I think in common sense and polling there are two problems. First of all, sampling, which has become very difficult. And because people are harder to reach, they have kind of busier lives, and there are more different ways of getting in touch with people. So getting a genuinely random sample of potential voters is harder than it used to be. And secondly, that phrasing the question is pretty hard as well, and people have a vested interest in that, but the polls haven't been bad. But I think I'd go back to one thing that you said there, which is this issue of spurious correlations. Yeah, correlational observational studies are terrible. Getting insight from observation is really hard. What's so much easier is interpreting experiments. If you do A/B testing, you'll find out if A works better than B. If you have more complicated A/B testing, you act on things, you take decisions and find out what happens, then you know. That's much easier to understand.
Okay. Anyone else want to pick up the mantle of the case study here?
You're going to regret this. Okay, in terms of the data, in terms of the mantle on this question, I would probably have a think about some of those bigger data sets that I was talking about around the first question. So thinking about social data, thinking about search behaviours, thinking about content. So looking at the passive data that's out there, as just thinking about it as a researcher, if you're looking at elections, people can often be embarrassed to admit to different things, and there may just be something about using AI to really try and tap into some of that passive data where people perhaps are being slightly more honest about what's going on. So I'd go down that route.
Okay, right. Nobody else needs to answer if you don't want to, so that's fine. I think there's a kind of point here, perhaps, because it's a good question, and it's kind of, it's a sort of, oh, okay, well, very tangibly here, and it's like, well, what are the kind of questions that it can answer? And I think that is a very good point, and thank you for implicitly making that. I think that's the point which you're making. So, look, time for one more quick question, and then I want to sort of just do a wrap up with so Steve down here, Steve Thompson, who I know of old. So hello, Steve.
Thank you, Colin. Yes, hi there. Well, picking up really on something that Chris said, and this traitor in your pocket, we already know that people are getting a bit more kind of nuanced and careful about their public persona, and that's what's really showing up in this passive data, and what they really feel and think in private. I'm just wondering if we think we're going to increase that kind of discrepancy as people start to see the consequences of the decisions and their kind of digital behavior. That says, well, now they're going to be less spontaneous, less honest, because what they post, look at, do, think, feel in public is going to potentially hit them later.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. If you segment the population, millennials and Gen Z are actually absolutely fine with AI and personalized experiences. I think it's the older generations that fear it, but people have already grown up with it in the last 5 years. I think as a provider, you have a real obligation not to be creepy. You know, there's this useful to creepy continuum, and you're only hurting yourself if you're showing that you know too much. So I think that's a way that you can damage your own product, is by letting the user know that you know a lot about them in a very personal sense rather than a behavioural sense.
To messaging apps, and that's a very different behavior that you can't see.
Yeah. I mean, I'd argue that obviously Facebook see pretty much everything, and I think, I mean, just from the conversations that we have and the use of Amazon, for example, you know, they have very positive results with personalization. And with younger demographics in particular.
Right, thank you. We're keeping these guys, we're in between these guys and their lunch. So let's have some just any other pithy comments on that one. And I've got a final question and then throwing it back to the audience. So Chris, you look like you wanted to, if you keep it as they say on the Today programme, sort of, if there's anyone wants sort of, 10 seconds, please.
I'd question whether millennials might be happy with personalisation now. That's because they haven't lived very long and had many bad experiences. Let me just throw this at you. I mean, computer vision is amazing. You're quite right. There's fantastic progress. So much progress that identifying a full-on, full-frontal picture of your face among hundreds of thousands of others is pretty much feasible now. And there was, even last year, there was doxing in Russia from pictures on dating sites and other websites where people didn't want their faces to be recognized, and you can find other photographs of the same person. So how many people here have had your photograph on a dating site with maybe a slightly embarrassing profile within the last 10 years? Maybe somebody's got it stored somewhere? Oh, that's great. Now they can do, in principle, I don't think the software is publicly available yet. Hey, your whole identity can be discovered from that. Now, I don't think people are going to necessarily like that.
Okay, thanks.
Just on that, though, I think from a millennial's point of view, they're used to that, so it's not something they'll be like freaked out about. They're kind of almost resigned to the fact, well, that's out there now. So we get that impression all the time from that generation, that it's just accepted as normal.
Okay, good. Well, it's interesting how we very quickly get into a conversation about privacy around this topic, and because clearly it's hot. Right. Now, there's a very interesting experiment about judges and their sentencing behaviour. And they found that actually judges' sentencing got harsher and harsher the closer you got to the mealtime, to their break. So on that basis, I want to very quickly ask these, kind of prime you guys by asking these guys, okay, I reckon my quick artificial intelligence computation in my brain was about 15% of you were going to, or us, I should say, were going to be jobs at risk from artificial intelligence and machine learning. What do you reckon? You know, sort of how higher, lower? Give me a number.
What, you're going to get them to vote again?
No, I'm not going to get them to vote again, but I want your perspective first.
I think it's higher.
Higher.
Yeah.
How much higher? Give me a number.
30?
30, okay.
I don't know, but what would somebody kind of like you have been doing 20 years ago? Would they have been doing the same job you're doing now or a different one?
Chris, I need a number.
Well, we truly believe that the AI component is actually, this makes people more efficient, which is another term for job loss. We understand that, but I think 10 to 15% is a fair idea. But essentially, what will happen is that researchers, marketeers will become more strategic and just better at what they do by AI. They won't have algorithms running marketing departments because, in essence, it's an emotional job, and you need to have emotions to do it effectively and well.
Okay, Sam, compute me a number.
24.3%.
Excellent, good man. Right, okay. Show of hands. How many people think their job is at risk by through artificial intelligence or machine learning in the let's say near future? Okay. The numbers have actually, you know what? What do you reckon, guys? I think they've gone down. You know, I think they've gone down. Hey, that's okay. So that's a. Oh, have I changed the question? Well, I know, but that's my right. Okay, yeah. So you got more lenient. So jury's out. I don't think even if I changed the question, it would be that much different. So thank you all very much. Very interesting conversation. Very interesting discussion. Thank you for the panel. Much appreciated.